Warriors, episode 451.
Woo.
As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by viable human Chris Saturn.
You can't say as always. I had to miss the last 2 episodes.
As always,
All right.
except for those episodes that shall not be named
I missed 450.
ever. We'll never discuss them again. I think secretly you were sick on purpose so you didn't have
not.
to talk about MMOs for 4 hours.
No, So the weird thing is I actually felt okay. It's just I was throbbing in pain.
So you had showed up to do the show and told us what was going on, and we were like, you need to get off the call right now and go to the emergency room.
I was planning on going the next day, and and I was just going to go to urgent care. And after you guys said that, I was like, oh, maybe I should have been going to somewhere earlier. And I get there, and the doctor's like, yeah, it's probably just an infection. You'll be fine. I'm going to give you a shot. You'll be fine.
It was an infection in your face.
True.
And if I know one thing, it's you don't fuck around with infections or things in your face.
Yeah, that's true.
Because this recipe, you got lots of really good bits in your face.
Yeah, so as
Lots
Justin
of
says, never
A-quality
fuck with the
bits.
face.
Lots of A-quality bits in the face, like the brain and the eyeballs and the mouth and shit. You don't want to fuck any of that up.
I think I might have D+ quality shit in my face. Maybe C-.
I, however, have been having sinus issues this week.
Yeah.
So if I sound weird or out of it, that's why. I
Well,
don't
you just
have
need to
anything.
go find that guy. He'll give you a steroid shot and some antibiotics. You'll feel great the next day.
I could go for a steroid shot.
Right.
Take one of those. Maybe I
gave-
can get those on Amazon.
He gave me a steroid shot, and then he also wrote me a prescription for an additional steroid that I could take over the next 5 days.
I learned that when you're real sick, if you go to the doctor, that in addition to the regular stuff you get for whatever illness you have, you can just ask them for a steroid shot. And most of the time, they'll be like, okay. Like, if you're just like, hey, man, I got shit to do. Can you pump me with a steroid shot? They'll be like, yeah, sure.
Hey, Doc, you got the roids today?
You could just, surely if you're going every week asking for it, there's going to be fucking questions. But, like, I didn't know you could do that. And one time I'd gone in, I was real sick. I don't remember what I had, but they gave me a penicillin shot. And I was like, I was like, I got to pick my kid up from school. I got to take care of shit. Like, can y'all give me a steroid shot? And they're like, yeah, we don't care. Like, jammed me with it. Felt great. Felt awesome.
There's a dude that I worked at a previous job who was a big musclehead who imported his steroids from overseas. He wasn't about to go to a doctor for that.
I think the steroids that bodybuilders take are very different.
A little
from the
different,
ones
yes.
the doctor gives you.
And he is also in med school at the time. He's a doctor now. And
okay.
Yeah, he anytime that I would go to a doctor, he'd be like, "What'd you tell him to give you?" And I was like, I didn't. They're the doctor. I let them prescribe it. He said, never do that.
Yeah.
Never go to a doctor and just let them tell you what you have and what you're going to get. Just make sure you have a plan. Go in there, tell them exactly what medications you want and when, and make them write you a script. I'm like, that doesn't seem healthy to me. I don't know as much about medicine as them.
There is a middle ground. My wife will go in there and she'll tell the doctor, will be like, what about this, this, and this? And my wife will be like, no, I don't like this part and this part of your plan. And they'll be like, well, what about this? And I'm like, you can do that? You can just be like, I hear you, doc, but fuck that. Give me something else. And you can just do that. I didn't know you could do that.
You just tell the doctor, no, I'll take a number 2 with no cheese.
This is why men die earlier. Well, I just didn't know. I didn't know that you could be like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. And they'll just give you something else. They'll be like, all right, we'll come up with an alternative care plan.
It turns out you have cancer. I don't want that. Okay, you have AIDS.
All right, we're going to downgrade it. This is a show about video games.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we've officially transitioned into the old people show because we're talking about our health. You know, like anytime an old person is in the same room as another old person, they got to be like, well, I was at the doctor last week on my hip. And they're like, oh, yeah.
We transitioned into a show of old people many episodes ago. Many. We've talked about taxes on this show. We've talked about healthcare plans.
What gets me is not that I find myself, the older I get, having more conversations about people and their health and doctor visits. What upsets me is I'm interested in it. It's not that it happens. It's that I'm like, really? And then what? I'm like, what the fuck's happening to me? Like, holy shit. This is how it happens.
It's like how I used to watch my dad have conversations about like lawn care and everything, and I was like, I have no idea why anybody would ever want to sit through this conversation. And now there are people that I know my age, they're like, yeah, but what kind of grass you got there?
I've been playing video games.
Have you?
I picked up Returnal.
That was a PS5 exclusive for a while there, right?
It was a PS5 exclusive for a while. It's been ported to PC, and I picked it up. Not because I didn't know anything about it. I remember seeing like the cover art for it, but I immediately dismissed it because it looked like a horror thing. Like just from the cover art.
Remember getting slightly around mediocre reviews?
And why I got it was I was watching just some random YouTube video about some like PC or a laptop or just like a tech review. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But they're testing this gaming rig, and they're testing it with Returnal. That's the game they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
They never mentioned the name of the game, and they're just like, "All right, this is the FPS we're getting. Let's change these settings. This is it with ray tracing and DLSS and blah 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 blah." But the game looked so fun. I was like, this game looks awesome. What is this cool, like, sci-fi, third-person, shooty gun, sword, stabby, jumpy game, which is the full genre designation.
That is, yeah. It's also the subtitle.
I couldn't figure out what it is. I was in the YouTube comments looking for what it is. And finally, I saw there was, like, a little objective in the top right corner of the screen. And I paused the video and zoomed in and read it, and I Googled that phrase, and it pulled up a guide for Returnal telling me how to achieve that objective. And I was like, ha ha! And then I'm looking at it, and I find out that it is a third-person action game roguelike.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, these are all right in my wheelhouse. And then I see that it also says it's psychological horror, and I'm like, that's not in my wheelhouse. But I picked it up anyway just because the gameplay looked so good, and I was like, I'll just close my eyes during the scary parts. And it is a fantastic game.
Yeah.
It is the best way I can describe it is like a Metroid Prime Dark Souls roguelike is what it feels like.
That sounds like words that are mashed together.
It has this kind of like Metroid-y progression where like eventually you get like a little grappling beam and you can like grapple to different platforms and you unlock different traversal abilities, and it plays out in kind of this, you know, Metroid search action-esque kind of way. You also are playing a spacefaring female protagonist, you know, in a little suit thing. So there's some Samus parallels there.
Right.
But the world you're in is it's not fully procedurally generated as far as I can tell. It's like different zones are kind of Legoed in together, right? So like you'll hit a room and you'll be like, oh, I remember this room. And it'll be mostly the same, maybe different items, maybe different enemies.
Yeah.
And the doors in it lead somewhere else, but you know this Lego piece, right? And then whenever you die, you lose most of your stuff. There's some meta progression I'm not going to spoil. And when you unlock new abilities, you keep those. So like the ability to break through certain like red barriers, the ability to grapple around, like you keep that stuff. You lose the rest of it, and then you start over, and you're going back through, and it's Legoed together differently. And every now and then, when you achieve certain things, they throw in new Lego pieces into the big room Lego pile. And so it's a nice balance between like full proc gen, which can sometimes feel like weird and unfair, and you know, traditional kind of search action level design. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. The horror in it is just spooky enough. Celine, the main character, is awesome. It's super fast and snappy and fun. It's just so good. If you like third-person action games and you have not played Returnal, man, it's a good one.
Nice.
It's real, and the story is really interesting. The planet you're on is really interesting. It really does, like, if you told someone now, like, hey, make a third-person Metroid game from the ground up, like, I feel like with modern sensibilities, you know, not the Nintendo sensibilities, I feel like this is what they would give you.
Yeah, except for it's slightly roguelike.
It is slightly roguelike. Yeah, that's kind of the difference.
Yeah.
You're even like scanning shit. Like there's your favorite part of Metroid Prime Saturn is scanning. It's not first person scanning, thankfully. But any new item you run into, you'll scan it before you pick it up, so you know what it's going to do before you grab it. Because some items do bad stuff. They'll have benefits, but you have to. They'll also have suit malfunctions that you'll have to contend with.
Aside from the theme, I am struggling to see the Metroidiness in it.
gated progression based on picking up specific items while traversing
Okay. I
linearly
guess there's
through
that.
a world that has different themed areas.
Is there a lot of sequence break opportunities?
I don't know
Oh,
if
see, that's-
I don't know if I'm not good enough at the game to
Right,
be
that's
breaking
fair,
any
yeah.
sequences, and I don't want to lose my meta progress
Right,
to
that's
restart
fair.
the game to try. Now, I will say there have been moments where I for sure feel like I shouldn't have gotten to something, but I did. Where like there will be a platform like before I got the grappling hook
Yeah.
that I can't reach, but there's this certain enemy. You know the little things in Half-Life 2 that like grab you and they pull you up to the ceiling by their tongues?
Yeah, barely, yeah.
It has like grosser versions of those, and I was using one of those to get to higher platforms I couldn't
Nice.
otherwise reach. So I can't tell if it was this thing where the developers left it there on purpose or if maybe it just generated that way. I have no idea. I really don't know how the inner workings of the game work yet.
Yeah.
All I know is it's really fun.
Nice.
It feels very Metroidy. The first area is like a cool jungle zone, and then it goes to like a cool desert zone, and it's so fun. The downside is it's really, 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 really hard. But on PC, it's extremely easy to mod the game. So I just went to
Nice.
Mod Nexus and downloaded like 9 mods that make things either cheaper or just lower the difficulty and
Nice.
installed all those. You just literally drop them in a folder called mods,
Right.
and they just work.
That's good.
And they're all teeny tiny, and it makes the game so much more fun. And I'm just enjoying the crap out of it. I'm fully invested in the story and Celine's journey and the world, and oh man, it's just really cool.
Nice.
And I'm past, for people that know the game, I'm just past the second boss. I'm in the third zone, which I won't spoil. And the game is implying that I'm coming to either some kind of big act break
Yeah.
or the end. I mean, one of those two things is going to happen. I think it's going to be a big act break. I think there's going to be a second act of some sort, but I don't know yet.
I've been hearing good things about most of Sony's PC ports the last couple of years. Like,
Yeah,
as far as like features they support and quality of the port and stuff like that. So it's it's good to hear
And
that's
the game runs great. I mean, I'm hitting 110, 120 FPS pretty nonstop. Some areas with lots of volumetric fog, I'll drop down to like 90, but I've never seen it go below 90. I've ray tracing on, everything's on ultra
Nice.
whatever mode.
yeah.
And it runs great. It's a good game. It's a lot of fun. It's one of those games where like if it was like $30, I'd be like 1,000% buy this.
Right.
Like no questions. But it is pretty regularly full priced.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to go on sale the same way that like God of War and the Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank and everything do.
Yeah.
I still like it for that price. But if you're like, no, I'm really not into that amalgam of genres that you just threw out there, then maybe a hard sell.
But
But
what I
ahead.
just looked it up on Steam. It's $59 right now, which appears to be full
Mhm.
price.
Yeah.
Which is $10 less than it is on PS5.
Oh, well, PC version runs better than the PS5 one.
Yeah.
At least if you have good enough PC.
And apparently it supports more resolutions than the PS5 version too.
Yeah, that's nice. I am a little bummed because it only the highest 1610 resolution it supports is 1900 by 1200, which is below my maximum resolution.
Right.
But it also means I'm well over 100 FPS
Yeah.
with ray tracing and everything on, so I'm kind of happy with it anyway. There are some modes, like I've not played it co-op online at all because it is a co-op game.
Yeah.
And there's I guess kind of an arcade mode called Tower of Sisyphus that I've not attempted yet because I'm still sort of unlocking like meta progression stuff and I'm like chomping at the bit for the next cutscene to see what happens, you
Right.
know?
Nice.
It's real good. Like
Nice.
if you're into like search action, I would say if you like search action games and you like Dark Souls and you're okay with roguelike stuff, it's a no-brainer. I wouldn't buy
like
it
one of
for
those
the
things.
horror. There's not the cutscenes are kind of pretty sparse.
Yeah.
A lot of the game is told through logs. But in this spoils almost nothing because you figure it out immediately. The idea is that Celine has crash landed here, and every time she dies, she comes back. And so she's
Right.
finding her old corpse over and over and over and finding audio logs of herself that have not happened yet.
I think that was in the trailers too.
Yeah, so a lot of the game is told through like audio logs of Celine from the future for things you haven't experienced yet, and it gets increasingly weird and creepy as you would suspect, you know.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of my go-to. Like I'll sit down and play for an hour and do like a run, and then die and unlock some stuff, and then and move on with my day. It's real good. Highly recommended.
Nice.
I'm also still doing Destiny stuff. I'm playing with Guy and Andrew, and I'm kind of coming up on the game has what's called a soft cap. So the soft cap is when you stop getting gear of higher levels and you start having to do extra steps to unlock higher level gear. And it's kind of like in MMO parlance, kind of like hitting max level in an MMO, and then after that, you're doing like legendary gear or whatever to increase your power,
right,
as it were. And still enjoying it. It's Destiny 2. It's like a really solid B+ shooter game, you know. But we've been killing a few evenings doing that and having a good time. But I've still not played any of the new campaign stuff that I've missed. I've just been doing like weekly quests and getting my gear up to snuff and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what have you been playing, Saturn?
So the Steam port of Dragon Quest Builders 1 came out.
I saw that,
and I didn't think that I would play it again.
Because the second one, I think I remember you reporting, was so much better than the first one.
Just so much better than the first one. But I thought I would give it a try, just see what was different, and got sucked into it because they implemented a ton of quality of life improvements, mostly from the second game.
Okay.
And also from the mobile port. And they've made it just a much more streamlined, much better game than the original version was, while still keeping the chapter based gameplay and the story.
I'm kind of shocked it didn't get a retitle then.
Right?
Dragon Quest Builders 1 Definitive.
Yeah, that's something. I'm a little surprised because I did not think it was going to be this big of a change, but it's got just
is it full? It's not full price on Steam, is it?
No. Oh, it's Square Enix priced.
What does that mean? $40?
I think it was $50. Let me double check.
In a world of $70 to $100 games.
Oh no, never mind. It's $30. So it's
I thought it was cheaper.
Yeah, so they're selling it for, currently it is on sale for $27.99.
And it's cheap.
Yeah, and you can get it in a bundle with the second game if you haven't bought the second one yet. So you can get them both on Steam for some price. I don't know what it is because they won't tell me because I have them both. But no, it's a good port. It runs well. It's easier. It's more streamlined. It's more player friendly. It's more friendly to people who are crunched on time.
Yeah.
It's just a better game than the original was, and the
bundle is $69.40.
It's weird.
It's an 11% bundle discount, which is bizarre. How weird.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised that they did release this without any new name or any special title or anything, mainly because that means they're definitely not going to port this backwards to consoles.
Yeah.
And they could use it because this is just a better version of the game.
Yeah.
So if you haven't played the first one yet and you are interested, this is the way to get it. Don't get it on Switch. Don't get it on PS4 anymore. Those are deprecated and honestly not as good. They got rid of item and tool durability, which is so nice. I'm so happy they got rid of that. And they made a lot of things just much more streamlined and easier, and it's great. It's worth picking up. Also, I was playing something called Portal Revolution.
Okay.
Which somebody at my office recommended to me. It is a mod of Portal that is sold as a standalone game, and it does require Portal 2 to run. And it's fairly, or no, it is free. I think it is free. It is a free mod. But it is huge so far from what I have played, and it's fully voice acted. It has a good script that makes it maybe not quite up to the writing quality of Portal and Portal 2, but pretty close. Which is high praise because those have brilliant writing.
Yeah. Very funny games.
I'm not fully through it yet, but it does feel like a good, just some more Portal, which is all I wanted from it. So if you are just looking for more Portal, that's a good way to go. But you do have to own Portal 2 to get to it.
Which, honestly, if you have been on Steam for any amount of time, you probably already own Portals 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah, they basically give them away every so often.
Yeah.
And then also I have been playing Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Which...
Is it the best Yakuza yet, like everyone keeps claiming?
I don't know definitively. I'm not too far into it. I am really liking the writing and the characterization and everything. My big issue with Like a Dragon, I think it was your issue as well, was there was just some weird difficulty spikes.
Very bizarre spikes, yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't gotten to any of that yet.
Well, that's good.
So far, it feels like a relatively natural progression as far as difficulty, which is good.
I had issues with the combat in general, just like being kind of slow, changing jobs. You had to go to a specific location to do. Like everything just felt sort of like these are all good ideas, but they don't really feel like they work super well. Like the calling in of the whatever the assist moves are called, where you'd call in
the pound
and, like, have
mates.
a crab. Yeah, and they some of them were. And most of them were virtually useless in the face of later abilities you would get. Like, just these are all cool ideas, but they all just kind of don't work with each other. There's not a lot of synergy going on.
Yeah, I haven't gotten late enough to say if all that's fixed yet. I will say that everything feels pretty smooth so far. If anything, parts of it feel a little too easy. But I am also early enough in the game that it might just still be in the easy area. So
yeah, and played 100 hours of the last game, so you might just be more well poised for it.
But I will let you know if I start seeing those same difficulty spikes, because that's my concern. That's what I'm really afraid of.
I remember being so sad that I put down Like a Dragon because I was enjoying it. I just wanted the game to work with its systems better.
I was fortunate that I played it on Xbox, because then I could just load up my save file on Game Pass on my PC and just cheat.
Yeah.
And that made it so much better.
Let's do the news. First up, the PlayStation Portal has been hacked and is able to run a PSP emulator. Now, if this turns into a very hackable device with multiple capabilities, it could end up being a pretty good $200 emulation machine if that's sort of the road it goes down.
What's weird is that it handles the emulator so well in the first place, considering Sony doesn't allow anything to run natively on it.
Yeah, it's I don't know anything about the software it's running,
right?
But it's got to have some kind of like Android or Linux backend for it to be able to do this, right? Like, I mean,
there's got to be some level of OS on there. I don't know what OS it is, but
I assumed it was just like a proprietary thin client
here
with network connectivity, but to be able to run any other binary on it kind of implies that there's some sort of actual OS in there.
Unless they've just hijacked the thin client to direct it towards some device running a PSP.
Maybe, but it's encouraging to see. The Portal is one of those devices that I see being kind of heavily discounted and then off the market for a year and then the price quadrupling.
Yeah. As it is now, it keeps selling out and they can't keep it in stock.
I think 2 or 3 years from now, when the heat has kind of died down, it's going to be one of those things you could pick up on sale for like $120.
Right.
And if it ends up with a decent emulation scene, then it could, I see this being a future like budget choice.
Yeah.
Off of the discount rack whenever like the PlayStation 6 or whatever is announced.
Yeah, it looks like they do say that it was that PPSSPP was running natively on it. So
it's got to be a Linux back in there. Like
something.
That has to be it.
Yeah.
Beta build of Hotel Mario has been found, unfortunately. I'm always in favor of game preservation.
Yeah.
But man, some games, I'm just glad they are preserved, but I don't want to experience
I don't want to have to play it. Please don't make me play it.
Konami is re-releasing their GBA game Ninja 5.0, which some people might remember as being that one insanely expensive GBA game that was on sale for $4 at Target for fucking years.
You mean one of those insanely expensive GBA
one of
games.
them. Yeah. It's coming out on all current platforms along with a physical release, unfortunately, by Limited Run Games.
Right.
which means it will continue to be limited in physical form.
Yeah, and LRG is also teaming up with Konami for that new Contra game because apparently Konami just lets LRG publish all their games now.
You know,
and why wouldn't they? You know, because apparently that's working.
I mean, here's the thing: is like you see all the time outside of like really big heavy hitters.
Yeah,
you'll see games released with big giant $150 special editions that have like statues and art books, and they'll languish on Amazon for months and months and months.
Yeah.
Turns out all you got to do is have LRG publish that same shit pile.
Exactly same thing.
And it sells out instantly.
Yep.
And people go berserk for it.
And you don't even have to make it available for another 3 years. You just have to take the money and say, someday we'll make this.
Final Fantasy HD Type 0 on PS4, the special edition of that got down so cheap that I bought it because it was like $19. Because why the fuck not? If it's got one cool thing in it or the game is kind of fun, it was worth it. Yeah. Like, I know that a lot of special edition stuff has a reputation of selling out immediately, but outside of like Pokemon, you know, like Fire Emblem, you know, big stuff like Xenoblade, yeah. Really outside of Nintendo special editions, a lot of special editions tend to languish on shelves for a while. So it's
or that Final Fantasy Pixel remaster that sold out pretty.
Yeah, that one. What a weird, like how weird.
I'm pretty sure Square Enix made 4 of them.
Yeah. Yuzu has been sued by Nintendo.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about this because there has been so much discussion about it. There's been a lot of hand-wringing. There's been a lot of speculation. There's been a lot of like, oh, today's the day. Emulation will see a courtroom. Let me put this out there. First of all, this kind of thing has happened a lot. This is basically stage 2 of the cease and desist letter. It is, here's your cease and desist letter. You didn't respond to our cease and desist letter. We are now suing you, saying that what you're doing infringes on our copyright. Like, this is a normal thing, and it's happened a lot. And I think we have reports that Yuzu is planning on standing up to it.
It seems to be that they didn't just immediately back down at the very least. Now, I also want to say that neither of us are lawyers, so we are not experts legally. However, emulation has already been tried in court, and there's been 2 hearings. There was Sony v. Bleem and Sony v. Connectix, and they both ruled in favor of the emulator in the end, even though the emulator companies both ended up going out of business because of those lawsuits.
Yeah. Nintendo's claim here is that Yuzu decrypting their encryption keys is what is the piracy portion of it. Which, for people that don't know, you have to provide Yuzu the decrypted keys.
Correct, yeah.
Which it then applies to encrypted software, but I don't believe Yuzu does the encryption. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know.
And even if they did, as long as you came about a decryption method on your own that didn't rely on their proprietary technology, then I think it's still legal. I don't think
it's not too different than how Dolphin used to run, where you had to provide some information from your Wii, and I believe the Wii U emulator that I'm blanking, Cemu, whatever that one is.
Yeah, Cemu,
yeah, that one also required some data from a Wii U to operate correctly, so...
My point is this, Nintendo only needs to threaten a lengthy legal battle for most people with a brain to back down, because in civil cases, you cannot be assigned a lawyer like in a criminal case. You have to pay for a lawyer. And Nintendo, little spoiler here, has really good lawyers and a lot of them. So it's basically Nintendo. It's basically Nintendo saying, "Hey, you either go bankrupt or you give it up.
Yeah,
these are your options."
And it's not like there aren't already other Switch emulators on the market either. And I assume Nintendo will immediately go after them if this is successful. But it's shitty to see Nintendo continuing to do things like this that don't need to happen. I am almost certain that this is either. My 2 pet theories are either because of all of the news articles showing that Tears of the Kingdom was emulated and looked better before it even released. And also my other pet theory is that the next hardware that Nintendo is planning on releasing is similar enough to the Switch that they are worried that code from this could be carried over and that system will be hacked quickly. Yeah.
love to see is like the FSF or the EFF or one of those nonprofits to back one of these projects up in court
Yeah.
and see it through. You know,
Right.
the people that are well versed in exactly this type of thing.
Right.
It's not going to happen. There's going to be a little bit of threats and a little bit of grandstanding, and ultimately, I suspect Yuzu is going to back down unless they have the most rock solid legal claim.
Right.
And even then, that's not quite enough when it's
Yeah.
your one rinky-dink lawyer you can barely afford versus Nintendo's fleet of corporate lawyers.
And we
So
can
it's-
say that there's been previous cases that have proved in favor of emulators. However, it's not to say that legal precedent can't be overturned. So
Right,
No.
right. And really it's a lot of times these cases don't come down to who has the better claim. It's just kind of who has the most money going to the courtroom.
right.
They can make their claim make the most sense, which is unfortunate. But I guess my point is that if it were to see a courtroom, it might not go the way we want, and it might have long-lasting ramifications on the rest of
We're-
the hobby.
Were either of the previous simulation lawsuits after DMCA got passed?
DMCA was 2001?
Okay, so I
Wasn't
think
it?
they were both before that. So there's
Yeah.
a chance that the DMCA may have changed things, and we've just been operating on shaky ground for
Floating
20 some odd
along.
years. So
Like, I don't mean to say Yuzu should back down or that they should have to back
Right.
down. I would love to see them get backed up by a nonprofit and fight this in court, as is their right. I think that's the platonic ideal of this situation playing out, right? But it's I just
and also,
that's not
Yuzu
always
has
how it
a
goes.
Patreon, but I think part of Nintendo's claim is that they are making money via Patreon on this. So
Right. If anything, I see them pivoting and pegging them on that before any real wrongdoing as far as how the emulator runs.
there's the people that are like, I want to donate to Yuzu to make sure they can defend themselves. I don't know if that's the best idea right now, because that
Yeah.
might actually make their case worse.
that I could see Nintendo pivoting away from the you are decrypting our keys thing and just going, you're making money off of
Right.
our work, and that's a much more cut and dry
Yeah, that's a much easier case.
arena. So movie cart shown playing movies via the Atari 2600.
It
How
looks
do
so
they
weird.
look?
Did you see this?
No.
Oh, it looks like trash, but it's really interesting. Like
Yeah.
it's really interesting trash, and it looks like it's running at the Atari 2600's native resolution. And oh man,
Oh, no.
are you looking it up?
No, I
Oh man, you got to at least look at some images of it, if not a little video clip.
all right,
'Cause,
here
man,
we go.
it looks.
Oh. Oh.
And this cart has a little SD card slot.
Oh, she bad. She real bad.
And so you can take the SD and just jam it in this little cartridge that has a picture of popcorn on it and jam it in your Atari 2600. And it just looks so bad.
It looks like that that little video of Hank Hill at the counter at like Megalon Mart. He's like, "Do I look like I know what a JPEG is?" And it keeps getting increasingly shitty.
It kind of looks like Max Headroom if you were watching it on a much worse television. It's just
And
so...
they can seek. It's got seeking. That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
insane.
And it has an OSD. So if you want to change like the brightness of the image, you could actually
Yeah.
pull up an on-screen display to change that on an Atari.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And finally, all of the games for the Epoch Cassette Vision have been dumped and properly emulated.
Justin, let me ask you, have you ever heard of the Epoch Cassette Vision?
No, I have not.
Okay, you and everyone else have never heard of this device.
I see a picture of it. It looks butt ugly.
It was a very old Japan-only device
Uh-huh.
that nobody ever heard of, but it's preserved now, and I'm really excited about that. The games did play off of cassette tapes.
The Cassette Vision sold around 500,000 units and was the best-selling video game console in Japan before the Famicom.
Yep.
That's pretty notable.
Yeah.
It looks like shit still. I'm just put out there. It looks like dog shit.
This is a pre-Famicom console
True.
that runs off of cassette tapes.
Oh, it's bad looking.
Yeah.
There was the Super Lady Cassette Vision, which is a vision of the Super Cassette that was aimed at a female market. Oh, I kind of want a Super Lady Cassette Vision now. Just be like, oh, it's the console for women.
Yeah.
The Super Lady Cassette. What about the name Cassette Vision is inherently masculine to the point that they're like, well, women need their own. They need a separate one. We don't want them touching our cassette visions.
Oh,
we'll
man.
release the Super Lady Cassette
Have
Vision.
you seen the Super Lady Cassette Vision?
No.
Oh,
Is
man. Let
is
me
it
send you a
bad?
picture. Oh, it's
All right.
hilarious is what it is.
I know now we're just like actively Googling things. Oh, no. Oh, it's so pink.
It does have some translucent plastic on there. And I know you're a fan of that.
Design-wise, looks a lot better than the regular Cassette Vision.
No, it looks like a children's ATM.
Shut up, Saturn. It looks great. looks like it's better than the regular
It's
one.
got a numpad on it for some reason.
It's yeah, so does apparently the
Super
original.
Cassette
I guess I was
Vision.
looking at a different picture of it. Oh, I was just on the Super Cassette Vision.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the Epoch Cassette Vision.
Yeah, this is the original Cassette Vision. It's the one
I
before the
see.
Super Cassette Vision.
All right, so the women got a Super Cassette Vision, but they didn't
Right.
get the maybe it was them protesting that, hey, you haven't released a Cassette Vision for us ladies yet.
Right.
And they're like, all right, well, when we do our new system, we'll make a lady version too.
Clearly, that was the important part.
Because that's smart. Splitting your skew amongst gender lines is always a great idea.
What's more
awesome.
important, pushing more software or pushing more units? More units.
Which brings us to our topic at hand,
Does it?
which is Dungeon Keeper. You know, it's Dungeon Keeper, Saturn. It's SimCity, but it's in a dungeon.
That's true. That's a good description of it. Yeah. It feels like it's halfway between SimCity and Warcraft.
I'll be using that comparison a lot.
Okay.
Throughout the course of this episode. Release information. This was developed by Bullfrog, published by Electronic Arts. Came out on DOS and Windows 95 on the 26th of June, 1997.
I was trying to find the Win95 version and I couldn't.
Yeah, there's a few versions because there's the DOS, there's the Win95, and then I think even Gold is later. So there's, I think,
Yeah, but
at least...
the gold version looks like it was just a re-release of the original with some added features or later patches or something.
Yeah.
And the version of gold that's sold on GOG is just the DOS version. They don't offer the Windows version again.
Weird.
Yeah.
Very weird. As far as first encounters, I was kind of tangentially aware of Dungeon Keeper and kind of thought of it. I assumed it was an RTS. It looks kind of RTS like. It's you know, it's just kind of how it seems. I've played the dungeon games, which are similar, and my interest was mostly in the fact that you got to be the bad guys, but the game itself always looked and felt a little too dated for me to enjoy until Keeper FX came out, and we
Right.
reported on that a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
So it was just one of those things where, like, I had played what felt like spiritual successors to it,
Right.
and never really wanted to go back to the clunkiness of the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. I'd seen it in magazines back in the 90s, and
Mhm.
I had no idea what genre it was from any of the advertisements.
Yeah.
But at the time, I wasn't super huge in PC games, so I was pretty picky about what I bought, and I
Yeah.
just didn't get to this one, and in fact, didn't play it until this week. And
Wow,
so I've been-
it almost never happens that we
Right?
do a show on something that you haven't played until the show.
right, yeah. So I was playing around with it this week, and it's really neat.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Let's talk development. Thankfully, we do have full credits on the game, so I do want to go through those because I mentioned some of these names later on in the development. And this is kind of one of the good things about PC gaming, at least in the West, is that people got credited for their work a lot
Yeah.
of the time.
Yeah,
This
EA
is a very
especially
nice
was pretty
thing.
good about it for a while there.
Yeah.
And now they technically still are. It's just like hundreds of pages.
Peter Molyneux did lots of stuff. He was the head of Bullfrog Studios. He was the founder of it. And he did a whole lot of work. He was kind of the lead on the project. You may have heard of him. He's
unfortunately.
relatively well known.
Yeah.
Simon Carter was the lead programmer. Mark Healy did the graphics. Jaunty Barnes did programming. Alex Peters did networking. Russell Shaw did sound and music. Barry Parker and Shintaro Kanaoya did level design. Stevie Laurie was on quality assurance, and Dean Carter was on UI. Like a lot of PC games in this era, most of these people did a lot of different things.
Right.
It's just kind of my simplification of what their job description looked like.
Yeah.
And of course, father of all gaming, who never told a single lie in his life, Peter Molyneux had a very heavy hand in the making of the game. It was, after all, his his company.
So I want to ask, what was your first Bullfrog game?
That's a tough one. What was their first game?
I don't remember what the first one. The first one of theirs that I played was Theme Park, and I played a ton of Theme Park, and a little bit of Theme Hospital.
I know I played Black and White, but that was after Molyneux left the company.
Yeah, that was Lionhead.
I thought the first Black and White they were still Bullfrog, and they didn't shut down until
that was Molyneux had already left Bullfrog, and that had been published under the Lionhead name.
Oh, then maybe Dungeon Keeper. It might be the one.
Yeah.
Molyneux claims he came up with the idea while he was bored and sitting in traffic, and he goes on to claim that he didn't even notice traffic was moving. Like he was sitting there still when traffic had cleared up because he was so engrossed in the amazing idea in his own brain.
That is the most Peter Molyneux statement I've ever read.
Yeah, or it could have been all of the excessive drinking and smoking he claimed to do in the official Dungeon Keeper manual or guidebook, which is where a lot of this information came from.
I believe that as well.
He also claims that working on the game required 15-hour days and the near severing of all social ties outside of their tiny studio. So truly a paragon of work-life balance and the industry. Made people ruin their lives to bring his vision to fruition. He did know Dungeon Keeper would be his last game with Bullfrog, so it does seem like they put some extra effort into it because he knew he was gone after this.
Yeah,
I don't know if he had already decided and stayed on because he had a contract or what the terms of it were, but he knew that this was his last hurrah at the game or at the company. So he seemed particularly invested in making it a good one.
Yeah.
Several others who worked on the game also commented on what they're doing now that the game is completed in the Dungeon Keeper official guide. Most of them seem very, very ready for vacation. Russell Shaw cites the project, the grind of the project, giving him nightmares. And this is all presented in like a very like cute, haha, we worked 20 hours at a time. Like it's supposed to be this like endearing story. And the whole time I'm just like, you could have just made the game a few months later and not killed yourselves doing it.
Could they? They did work for EA.
Yeah, but it was 90s EA, early 90s EA.
This isn't early 90s, sir.
Mid 90s to late 90s EA.
This is late 90s EA.
Thankfully, this is really useful. The book does include a full timeline on development.
Dang.
So in 94, Simon Carter started on the project. He by the end of the year was working on the 3D lighting routines in the game. Mark Healy joined the team and promptly apparently subscribed to an S&M magazine called Skin 2, allegedly for inspiration.
Yeah, for inspiration.
And we don't know how much of this official guidebook is a joke, how much of it is apocryphal, how much of it is these people having fun.
Right.
By May of 1995, research and development gave them kind of a rough engine. John T. Barnes joined and started working on levels in 95. By the end of 95, they had the possessed creature first-person view in the game. Dean Carter joined the project and started putting in shadows on everything, and they were trying to push it out for Christmas, but they failed. So December hits, they didn't get the game out, and they had to keep rolling into 1996. And this is when the team moved into Peter Molyneux's house to write a testbed version of the game because Peter decided that he isn't suited to corporate life and is much better at writing games. So he decides to focus on project and programming full time. He moves these people into his house. I can just imagine how they've got to feel at this point. They didn't get the game out, and he's like, "Yeah, we'll just come do it in my house." It's hard to tell if they all had to go to his house or if they got to still work at the studio and Peter Molyneux was at his house. I've seen conflicting reports, is all I'm saying. Or at least vague enough reports that it's not clear. By July 96, Alex Peters moves on onto the project and starts getting it working under Windows 95. They start integrating the test bed. They show the game in September of 96 at the European Computer Trade Show. It gets very well received. And then February 1997, they start focusing on finishing on the game. This is it. This is when they all move back to Peter's house. And the phrasing "move back to Peter's house" implies that at some point they went to his house and then they came back to the studio.
Yeah. They
First
were
version,
briefly allowed to escape, is what the
Yeah.
situation was.
It goes into final test in April of 97, and then June 97, they're done with the game.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to have these kinds of timelines. I wish we had these for all of the games we cover. But it seems like, especially when they wanted to launch it in 95 and it doesn't come out till mid-June of 1997.
Yeah.
That's a long time. That's a long time to have failed to meet your deadline.
Especially in the 90s. Because you saw
when
plenty of
development
games.
was a year, 6
Right.
months.
Yeah, plenty of games were getting pushed out in a year or less.
Yeah. As far as presentation, the game uses isometric 3D graphics to present a very kind of dark. I always thought the game looked a lot like Diablo,
Yeah.
which really released concurrently. I think first Diablo was 97 as well.
Yeah, I seeing it in ads, I thought it was just like a cartoony take on Diablo back then.
Yeah, especially by the time Dungeon Keeper 2 hit and we got a lot of the marketing with the demon guy and the woman in the black leather. It felt it felt like it was making fun of Diablo, which it was not. I mean, I guess in a way it was. I don't know. It's it's presented very kind of dark and grim, but everything's sort of overly dark and grim to the point that it becomes silly.
Yeah.
The music is largely atmospheric. There is a ton of room-based sound effects that I find extremely annoying. Like the training room, for example. Anytime you pan near one of these rooms, you can hear the noises going on in there, and a lot of them are just super annoying.
You know, I'd been playing it for a couple of days before I realized that I could use the soundtrack, because I was using the GOG version on Keeper FX, and by default, it doesn't seem to play the soundtrack, and you have to change some files and move them around, and then suddenly it can see everything and play it. Yeah. And before I was able to do that, some of those specific room sounds felt a little much.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. The game does also have an announcer in the campaign, which really serves to set the mood. The announcer kind of rides the line between like being obviously like tongue-in-cheek and being kind of too brutal. You know, like it's not full on like har, this is a silly Billy joke like in like the Dungeons games where there is also an announcer. Every now and then you're like, oh, this guy sounds kind of mean. So it's sort of right there in the middle for me. You know, it doesn't quite make the whole thing a parody, but it also doesn't. You can tell it's very much not serious.
Yeah.
Which I kind of appreciated, that sort of in the middle tone. As far as gameplay, the game really presents as a kind of economic simulator, very much in the same vein as SimCity. You begin the game as a dungeon keeper with a few imps who are your like workers of the game.
So your orcs, your peons.
Yeah. You can purchase new imps at any time, but each costs more than the last, which puts a sort of glass ceiling on the amount of workers, so you can't just rush out workers. They're the only unit you can manually generate, at least that I've experienced in the game, where you just press a button and make more of them. And they will automatically claim floor tiles for your dungeon that they have access to, and during their downtime, they will work to reinforce your walls against attacks. So a lot of the game is you generating imps, telling imps where to go, and then waiting on them to do their thing. It's not, you're not really directly controlling them.
Yeah.
You're just sort of giving them ideas and saying, I want these things done, and then you are hoping for the best a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Mining out walls in your dungeon is both how you find resources and make space for new rooms and features. You start by building a treasure room and a lair for your monsters to sleep and rest in, and that's sort of your basic economy. You now have a place for your monsters to live and rest, and you have a place for your treasure that you mine to go.
The mining and the building, for that matter, both went way faster than I expected it to. I was expecting like your traditional RTS, I have to sit there and wait for something to happen thing, and it's almost instant.
And the game, especially if you kind of invest in imps up front.
Right.
And I like that about the game. I like that the game, it very much doesn't try to time gate off your money. And the
Right.
reason it doesn't do that is because it very much is an economy simulator. There's only so much gold on the map.
Right.
And I don't mean so much gold on the map in an RTS sense where, like, maybe eventually it's possible to run dry on a mine, but it almost never happens. You're going to run out of resources every fucking game you play.
Right.
And so the game doesn't really care when you get it because you've got the same amount no matter what.
Right.
And it can almost be a detriment to quickly mine huge hordes of gold because it causes you to spend it very fast. And if you're not spending it smartly, you're still going to be screwed in the late game.
Right.
New monsters in your dungeon are attracted via portals. You have to dig them out of surrounding rock. Once you dig them out, your imps will claim the portal, and this is where new monsters join your dungeon from. So they have to have a path into your dungeon. Food is generated at hatcheries, which are basically little baby chicken hatcheries, and your monsters will go in there and chow down. You encounter eventually the kind of the game of Dungeon Keeper outside of just balancing your economy is adventurers will descend into your dungeon and look for weak spots in your walls to break in and destroy your core room, your dungeon heart. And this is the game part of the game. Now, granted, there are a lot of expansions and alternative campaigns and different maps and fan expansions for the game that add different objectives and all sorts of crazy different stuff. So even saying that this is the game part of the game is kind of a misnomer because there's a lot of different ways to play the game.
Right.
But if you're playing the campaign, this is sort of the basic game here, right? You want to build your dungeon. You want to build it up fast enough and good enough so that when adventurers show up, they get defeated. Once you defeat all of the adventurers for this area, the Lord of the Realm enters, and he's like the boss character. Some dungeons will also have other keepers, basically other dungeons that you must defeat or otherwise contend with, which can be a whole lot of fun. Is kind of it really turns it into not quite an RTS feel because you just never really have direct control over your monsters.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels a little more RTS-like in that there is it's less asymmetric. There's a similar force to yours, and you want to go take over their dungeon, take their rooms, kill their monsters before they do that to yours.
Right.
And the majority of the game is really just you passively managing your dungeon's inhabitants with various features and upgrades while sort of keeping an eye on your money situation. And it's a balancing act, right? So if you end up with too many monsters, you might have too much cost, which means you've ballooned out your expenses. There's only so much money. You're going broke. You can't afford to pay your monsters because on payday, they go to your treasury and take a big bag of gold each.
Right.
And this is where things like the torture room come in, where you can take a species of monster and torture one of them, and you don't have to pay their salary, and it causes the other ones to work faster. So you're getting more value for your money, but you will eventually accidentally kill the one that you're torturing.
It happens sometimes.
Yeah. If you have too few monsters, you're weak against attacks. And it's this tricky thing where since you don't make the monsters, you kind of have to, you create the conditions for them to exist.
Right.
And the rate at which they spawn is not up to you. And so it really is this kind of like a aquarium type scenario where you're just kind of watching it. Kind of like in SimCity, you build your infrastructure and you watch it to see where the traffic jams pop up because you don't know.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing that draws me into RTSs until I remember that I have to defend myself and fight things.
Yeah, suddenly you have to be non-passive.
Right. But I love that early game in the RTS when I'm just like directing my little dudes to build stuff and tunnel through forest and whatever. And this is mostly that.
Yeah. You can directly pick up creatures and put them in certain rooms. This is what you would use to like if you want to train some creatures, you'll pick them up off of your menu because your menu lists how many idle and how many active of each creature you have. So you'll pick up some idle creatures and drop them in the torture chamber, in the training room, in a guard post to stand guard at the front of your dungeon, but at the same time, you don't really control them. You drop them in the zone,
right?
and they will do their best to follow your wishes of getting trained unless you can't afford to train them, or being on a guard post unless they want to go sleep or eat a baby chicken. But even you directly picking them up is not really a control method. You can also slap them. If you have nothing in your hand, you can right-click a monster to slap them, or is it left-click with an empty? Either one.
I think it's right-click, and they tell you how to slap them during the tutorial.
Yeah, the tutorial steps you through slapping them. It makes them perform tasks faster.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't bring myself to do it. I felt too
I can on some of them. There's a little bit of, I don't know if it's fully misogyny, but there is a female demon, like succubus-like character in the game, and they're like, oh, they love getting slapped, and the slap is even more effective on them. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. You know, that feels a little weird. So the slap does have its effect.
Yeah.
And in some instances, it might be more effective than other methods of speeding up that creature's work. But really, this is the most direct control you really ever have over your inhabitants. Even like directing them to attack. You have two options. You can cast a spell that you'll get later on in the game that causes them. It's called Call to Arms.
Right.
And it makes all your creatures travel to this one tile. But they may or may not get there. They may or may not heed the call to arms. They may or may not run into something else along the way. And you can only drop your creatures on tiles you own. So if you're being invaded, you can only pick a creature up manually and drop them as close to the enemy as your dungeon extends.
Right. You can only really play defense. You can't go on the offense at all.
Right. And that's really the game. From there, it scales up dramatically.
Yeah.
Some of these maps are hours long for me anyway. And it's just this big, giant spinning plate economy simulator. Again, very much like SimCity, where you just sort of build it, watch it, keep an eye on it, tweak a thing here or there, and then just let it sort of grow. But there is a point that comes in every map where suddenly your resources are tested. You know, the same way that, like, I want to say the same way that, like, disasters in SimCity sort of test your city.
Yeah.
But disasters never really felt necessary. In fact, I think they're fully off. I mean, as far as I know, they're optional in every version.
Just about every SimCity, yeah.
And I think, don't they come default off in a lot of
most of them will
scenarios?
Have them on by default. I think the more recent ones will have them off by default.
Yeah. But even then, disasters in SimCity were never going to destroy your whole city.
Yeah.
You know,
unless you really messed up.
Right, unless you're hitting the button 50 times for disasters.
Yeah.
You know, this is like SimCity with more rigid failure states built into it.
Right.
Where it's like, no, someone is going to come out of this. Either the town's going to win, the other keeper's going to win, or you're just going to run out of money and sit there and eventually restart yourself. There are a lot of rooms and spells, and we haven't even talked about workshops and traps. Yeah. I don't want to go over every single one of them, but the way the rooms work is each room will attract a type of monster.
Yeah.
So you will get some control over which types of monsters you want to attract. So you're like, oh, I built a barracks, and a barracks will attract orcs. Or I'm going to attract spiders because I have a hatchery now. But then some of the monsters you have to keep an eye on because, like, you can get like flies. But if you have spiders and flies in the same room, the spiders will eat the flies. So you kind of have to be careful with it.
Yeah.
The spells are... There is a spell system. You will eventually attract warlocks to your libraries that you build, and the whole point is that they create these spells that give you more control, more immediate control over the realm. Mm-hmm. And it's things like healing, destroying walls, the call to arms we talked about earlier. You can turn some creatures into chickens, which is great. There's like lightning strikes, possessing creatures, stuff like this to slowly, as you research throughout the game, give you more immediate control as the dungeon keeper. Mm-hmm. But if there is a way to pick which spells you research in which order, I don't know what it is.
I didn't find that either.
Because they just seem to pop up randomly for me. I think there is a way to direct it, but I think it's sort of like attracting creatures, where you just sort of set the conditions and hope it occurs.
Yeah, I didn't get in depth enough to start actually manipulating anything. I still felt like I was learning how to play the game many maps after I was done with the tutorial, so I did not get that far.
Yeah. There are also doors and traps. Eventually you build a workshop, and the workshop just sort of generates doors and traps automatically, right? So you'll be sitting there and the game will tell you, the announcer will say, a door has been produced, a trap has been produced, and you can suddenly start setting these doors to create these passageways and funnel would-be invaders into traps and stuff. A lot of times you'll mine into like cave systems, and they'll be full of just sort of randomly occurring monsters, so you'll be able to put a door up to keep them from just running in your front door and messing your stuff up.
Yeah.
But it's just a big, giant spinning plate economic simulator that I've found to be really engaging. Like, I love SimCity, but SimCity has one of two states. You either succeed, which means you eventually quit because now you're just watching your successful city run itself, or your city crashes and burns. And a lot of the time, it's almost more fun to fuck it up and have it crash and burn.
See, I can't handle letting it crash and burn.
I like an end, right? I booted up Dwarf Fortress earlier today because we were talking about it in the chat, and I was like, oh, let me go boot up my kingdom. And my kingdom is so big, and that game has so many tools for automation that I kind of just watch it run like an ant farm.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to go away because I've put 60 hours into it.
Right.
But also, I kind of want a game to happen. You know what I mean?
That's part of what I like about SimCity 4 is even after I've finished one map and I've done everything I want to do with it, I have all those connections to other nearby cities. So I just move over and continue roads and projects over there.
Yeah. The Dungeon Keeper definitely feels more... It's not like SimCity in that you'll be booting up the same city day in and day out. Yeah, you boot up a map, you play that map much in a very RTS kind of way, and then you're like, okay, I did that scenario, that map, that whatever.
Right.
I'm not going to keep returning to this. I liked that kind of delineation between like broad, pointless economic simulator and RTS. It kind of splits the difference a little bit.
Yeah.
As far as reception... It was really well received kind of across the board for its depth, its uniqueness. People really liked the graphics in the game. It has, over the years, sort of become a PC gaming classic. It quickly hit PC Gamer's Top 100 games in June of '97 at number 4.
A lot of Bullfrog stuff has been considered classics over the years. One I forgot about earlier when we were talking about it was Populous, is also just a treasured classic. So, it's... that's one of those studios that these days we don't hear about too often, but they were huge.
They were putting out high quality stuff. It currently holds a 92% on game rankings. It sold 113,407 copies in '97, which was considered a huge success at the time. Yeah. To put it in perspective, that would be an utter failure today for EA, but that's a huge success at the time.
Yeah, they would Germany, never talk about it again at this point.
In Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, it received awards for selling over 100,000 combined in those three regions, and global sales for the game were over 700,000 by 2003, which Peter Molyneux reported, and in the same breath was being disappointed in the number.
That does sound like Peter Molyneux, yeah.
Because he thought it should have been bigger.
Of course. Well, he also thought that Black and White was going to be the highest selling game of all time.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
As far as legacy, several franchises have been linked either by the developers or the press to Dungeon Keeper as direct inspiration, or the press just saying, hey, look, these two games are similar. There's a game called Startopia, which was former Bullfrog staff that was a very similar premise, but just in space.
Also, it has a very bright and vibrant cover.
Yeah.
That's what I remember the most about it.
Evil Genius is kind of the same idea, except you're like a James Bond villain.
Yeah.
The Dungeons series, which I think they either have 3 or 4 of, are really good. Much more RT, 4 of them. Much more RTS-like, but very similar premise. They've even got the announcer. I really enjoy those games. Black and White kind of paid homage. They've got references to Dungeon Keeper within the game.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting that Dungeon Keeper, it's not quite an economic sim. It's not quite an RTS, and it's not quite a God game, but it sort of takes notes from all three in a way. And so I think there's some lineage between Dungeon Keeper and Black and White, which came, 2 years later?
Yeah, it was, it was 4 years later.
Was it 4?
I think so.
Oh, yeah, right. I don't know why I was thinking, yeah, it was 4 years later.
Yeah.
It was 2001.
Yeah.
The games we talked about a lot, Holy Invasion of Privacy Badman and What Did I Do to Deserve This, My Lord 2, are very similar premises as Dungeon Keeper 2. Theme Hospital had some Easter eggs that referenced Dungeon Keeper.
Now I need to go back and play that and find out what
and
they are.
I think it's you can see like an administrator playing Dungeon Keeper on a computer or something.
Yeah, that seems like something that happened there, yeah.
And both original Dungeon Keeper games are still available on GOG and just habitually on sale.
Yeah, pretty much all of the Bullfrog library is on GOG at this point.
Yeah. There were sequels. Fans will tell you there was only one sequel, but let me tell you about all the other sequels. In June 1999, Bullfrog released Dungeon Keeper 2. At launch, the game received a lot of praise for its visuals, gameplay-wise. Some people took issue with kind of a lack of innovation. It seemed more like a refinement than a reinvention. But it was a moderately celebrated game. It didn't seem like the innovative breath of fresh air that the first game was, but people seemed to enjoy it still.
I'm looking at the cover. I do remember seeing this in magazines, but I don't remember seeing it nearly as much as I saw the first one.
Yeah. In 2000, Dungeon Keeper 3 was in development at Bullfrog, but it was canceled. Some versions of
Bullfrog was shut down.
Right. Some versions of Dungeon Keeper. Well, here's the thing. Reportedly, it was canceled because they decided to just not make more strategy games. That is the reason that's reported on Wikipedia. But it seems more that it was the studio shut down. Yeah,
because at that point, the only other thing they still released was that that theme park sequel, the one that was Sim Coaster over here.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great.
Yeah. Some versions of Dungeon Keeper 2 included trailers for Dungeon Keeper 3, which showed off like overland battles, like outside of the dungeon, which is important to note. Also, the like working subtitle for the game was War for the Overworld. In 2008, Chinese developer NetDragon Websoft Incorporated, which is the greatest Chinese company name I've ever heard in my life, announced a deal with EA that would result in a Dungeon Keeper MMORPG. It was set to release in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau only. They had 2 betas in 2011 and 2012. The game was working and then was shut down in 2013 before final release.
Oh.
I don't know how a Dungeon Keeper MMO even works.
Right.
But okay. In 2014, EA released a mobile version of Dungeon Keeper. It was met with extreme negative reception. People fucking hated it. They added timers for tons of stuff and offered to let you pay your way past them. And overall, it just sucked and was dumb.
That sucks.
In 2009, a fan sequel to Dungeon Keeper was in the works called War for the Overworld. In 2012, it made its way to Kickstarter. It reached its funding goal, not by a huge amount. They wanted like 150,000 euros or pounds sterling. I don't remember. And they ended up with like 215. Full release of the game was on April 2nd, 2015, but it was unfinished due to financial problems. And in the following years, it would be patched and receive expansions. And despite massive launch issues, a lot of the problems seem to have been ironed out. The game's still on Steam for $29.99, and it has very positive reviews right now.
Oh, that's good.
So anyone who maybe wants more Dungeon Keeper and liked dungeons, but still wanted something more specifically Dungeon Keeper, something to wish list, maybe pick up on sale.
Looking at the pictures of it, it looks very modernized Dungeon Keeper.
It seems fine.
Yeah.
And then Keeper FX just hit 1.0 in late 2023. We reported on it. It added so much stuff to original Dungeon Keeper. It does require the original files, so you need like the GOG version or something to play it. But it made the game go from this clunky old thing that I kind of can't really get with to something that felt very modern.
Yeah.
The biggest things for me were shift clicking to fill spaces when making rooms and control clicking to like carve out large squares when mining. And that took out a huge amount of the UI tedium right there. Just kind of dragging rooms and areas to mine was such a pain in the ass without that. They have drag to build. They have tons of other quality of life interface changes. It has a ton of added fan content, higher resolution support, new creatures, full multiplayer support, tons and tons of bug fixes to the original code. And honestly, it's just kind of the best way to play the game.
It feels really polished. It feels even playing it in 4K on a modern computer, Keeper FX just seems to work really well.
Yeah, it works awesome. I mean, I was just playing it on Windows 11. I dropped a couple files in where it wanted, and it just booted up and ran. It runs great.
It's nice.
Even alt-tabbing out works fine. As far as I know, it's fully open source kind of rebuild of the game.
And I was able to have it running on one monitor and still do shit on my other monitors without it like freaking out about me changing focus.
I was able to alt-tab out, which kills a lot of older games.
Yep, that is true.
Until like 2010, the advice was never alt-tab out of a game ever. It will
control
kill it.
escape or anything else that might minimize it. Yeah.
Yep. So Keeper FX, kudos to the team working on that because it works awesome.
Yeah, it's very good. Very good port.
So the game has had a bit of a weird legacy. Dungeon Keeper 1 and 2 are kind of still treated as like the only Dungeon Keepers by a lot of fans because there's been a little bit of a bumpy road since 2 came out. And with Keeper FX, I haven't played the sequel yet, but my concern is now when I move on in Dungeon Keeper 2, it's going to feel worse than Dungeon Keeper 1 because it doesn't have the quality of life fixes of Keeper FX.
You know, what's sad is I was looking at this shitty mobile sequel that got discontinued and delisted.
Yeah. It looks nice.
Yeah, graphically it looks very nice, but the developer of it, do you see who was developing it?
No.
It's Mythic, the people who made Dark Age of Camelot.
Oh, so sad.
Yeah, how the mighty have fallen.
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
As far as final thoughts, I think Dungeon Keeper is just really cool in that kind of SimCity sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
Keeper FX is for sure the way to play it between the quality of life improvements and the wealth of new content.
Yeah,
I just had a really good time with Dungeon Keeper. If I were to levy any complaints against it, it can sometimes feel a bit unfair because there's really nothing stopping you from, again, mining all the gold up front, spending it all and screwing yourself.
It's true.
So it's not idiot-proofed, right? You know, the way that RTSs are kind of idiot-proofed in that you can only get so many resources at a time, so you can't waste a whole map worth of resources up front.
Right.
It does sometimes get a little repetitive, sometimes because you don't specifically control everything that happens. It means that there's sort of a slow build in the early game of each map that feels a little samey.
You have to have a little more patience than you want to have.
Yeah. I have to be smart and have patience, and neither of those are true of me. Sometimes just getting your minions where you want them to be is sort of a pain. But overall, just a really fun economic simulator with, an actual game attached to it, which is weirdly rare in this realm of like economic simulation software.
And also you get to control little demons, and I know you're a fan of that.
I do really enjoy the tone and the fact that I get to run a little dungeon, and there are moments where I'll just stop and just look at my dungeon and be like, it's so evil. We're going to kill all the humans. Like, I just enjoy that,
That's the same feeling I get when I'm playing SimCity and I'm like, look at this efficient commute that I've made between this building and the airport.
Yeah, no, I like it. I'm like, look at this perfect death trap I made that all the humans are going to get slaughtered in. Oh, look, I perfectly set it up so that the baby chicks my demons eat are central to all of the locations they need to go to promote, faster commuting to the torture room.
Perfectly healthy thoughts there.
I just had a really good time with it. It's a fun little game. It's not the kind of thing that I think I'm really going to marathon for 12 hours, but it's the kind of thing that in these 2 weeks of just having it on my computer, I would boot it up, play for 45 minutes and be done, and then get another session in later. And nice. I really enjoyed that about the game. I thought it was really good.
That's fair. Yeah, I would definitely agree with what you're saying about Keeper FX, because it is just really a solid port. I was trying to think about what game this was reminding me of all week. Yeah. And like there was something that I'd played years ago where I also was like controlling bad guys and plotting how they would kill the normal humans without any direct control over them.
Yeah.
And I realized it was a shitty game that I got for free from the Atari rep years ago called Ghostmaster.
Oh, I think I saw that on the list of like inspirational games.
Really?
I think I did. Hold on, I'm gonna look it up real quick.
All right.
You keep talking about it.
That's really all I have to say about it because it's not a good game. I'm not even sure I recommend it, but it was something I played quite a bit.
Yeah,
it's free.
it's 2003's Ghostmaster, in which players play the role. It is in the Impact and Legacy section of the article.
Nice. No.
This looks terrible.
It's really bad. I've still got the
by sick puppies. What the fuck?
Yeah, I've still got the disc for it. It's not a great game, but I played quite a bit of it. But anyway, no, I totally get what you're saying as far as the set it and forget it feel that you get with some of those old simulation style games. I do have the problem where any game I play, I want to grind as much as I can immediately. Yeah. And that can kind of fuck you in this. So I had
you have to be smart with your money.
I had to teach myself to not do that, which goes against my better judgment. But
I do it too, but not because I'm trying to like stop myself from a habit, because in my head I'm like, well, if I get all the money now up front, I don't have to worry about mining it later. And as long as I'm smart with my money, I won't run out, he says every time before running out of money.
Right. So I did have to put myself in a different mindset for it. But once I was starting to feel like I was getting there, it's really neat.
Hold on, let me read this to you. GameSpot named Ghostmaster the best computer game of August 2003.
They're wrong.
And the staff of XPlay nominated it for their 2003 Best Strategy Game Award.
Okay, XPlay, yeah.
Which ultimately went to Rise of Nations, but people fucking loved Ghostmaster.
At least 3 people.
It got pretty decent reviews too. GameZone gave it a 9 out of 10. PC Gamer gave it a 90%.
Well, if you want my disc, you can come get it.
No, I don't. I've seen the cover. I don't want to touch this piece of shit. This looks terrible. I know they say don't judge a book, but man, I'm gonna. This is awful.
Looks like it's $5 on Steam.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I want to look it up on Steam now. Hold on. Let me see here. Let's see.
It's
Ghostmaster.
It wasn't great, but I still
played it. It's not even
it.
on sale. It just is $5 on Steam.
Yeah.
This looks like The Sims, but with Poltergeist shoved into it.
That's basically what it is. It's basically you're in a Sims house and you get to assign ghosts to rooms to fuck with people.
So in a world where Sims 2 is like crushing PC gaming records, I could see how people would think this is like extra good. You know what I mean?
As someone who worked retail at the time, people weren't buying it.
Clearly, still aren't, because it's $5 and it's a lot of the reviews. Yeah. Although they are still very positive, all told.
Yeah, I've got my original box and everything for it, and the Atari rep had to punch a hole in the UPC so that I couldn't resell it.
Right, because you're going to resell Ghostmaster.
Yeah.
Saturn, you know what else you can't resell?
Your love.
My love for all of our patrons over at patreon.com/retro warriors, where I'm going to punch the UPC on your love so that you can't sell it anywhere else.
Well, I would like to apologize to our patrons that I already said I was going to sell your love to. I may have been wrong.
We have cool things there. Please go listen to them, period. There you go. That's my pitch.
End of sentence.
I hope sometimes I'm like, I get on my high horse. I'm like, we've turned down every sponsorship we've ever been offered, which to be clear isn't a lot.
Right.
But we're talking like 8 sponsorship deals we turned down
in 9 years.
But then sometimes I'm like, even if we did take one, I think they would hear my transition to their sponsorship one time and be like, never mind. No, we don't want you selling Audible subscriptions or NordVPN or whatever the fuck that fucking was, where I'm like, oh, you know what else is good on the internet? Is Dollar Shave Club.
If you want to know what else you should shove in your mom's mouth hole.
We want to thank the following patrons for giving us money every month. Starting with Poncho Man Randy Savage.
And Video Rangers Podcast.
Gold Leader.
Mark Meredith.
Brett Stifler.
Michael Modena.
Lane Hindi.
Casey McCoy.
Charles G.
and Matt Stone.
For all the patrons, we want to thank for the dollars and the cents that they give us that we use to buy things like Ghostmaster on Steam. Because who, if not us, then who? Who's going to remember the might that is Sick Puppies' Ghostmaster? Which
apparently
was
enough people to get
PS2
re-released
and
on
Xbox.
Steam.
It
It was on PS2 and Xbox?
Yeah, the full title of the console port, hold on, was Ghostmaster, The Gravenville Chronicles.
Oh, it was Europe exclusive. Okay, that's why I didn't know that happened.
Oh, I don't see anything else. The developer doesn't even have a Wikipedia article. Neither does the developer that ported it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So I guess they just shut down after they were.
They all dissolved.
They were like, we did it. We win video. We published Ghostmaster
Maybe they were just
X-Play's
haunting us
nomination
all along.
for Best Strategy Game Award. August 2003, Best Computer Game according to GameSpot. Who? What's not to love?
Yeah. Oh, I can tell you.
I don't think I've been so incredulous of cover art since that fucking Pac-Man cover art where he's got like short shorts and like a big package and he's leering at everyone.
Yeah.
Which fucking Pac-Man was that?
Is the was it the Atari ST one?
Maybe.
Now is the cover that you're seeing the one with the two people or the four people running out of a house?
No, I'm seeing this one that is just a big green ghost on the Wikipedia.
Oh, I'm seeing
article.
that. Yeah, that's not the cover. That's
Oh.
I don't know what that is. Oh, that's
All
the
right,
cover
let
of
me
the
go.
Mac version.
Google Images. Oh, this is worse.
Yeah.
This is a worse cover art.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't think it could get any worse. This is bad. Oh, no. Yeah, it just is straight up The Sims, but also What If Casper?
Yes, that is basically it.
What a fucking premise. Have you seen the cover art? There's a bunch of really good cover arts. Here's a good cover art with a very uncanny valley-looking child running
Yeah, that's
away.
the one that I have.
Oh, okay. There are several.
Yeah, this is exactly the cover that I have is like this dude in a hoodie and a woman and maybe some other people behind them running away from a house with ghosts in it.
So far, we have found 3 different cover arts for this game.
We did the patron list some time ago, and now we're just sharing pictures in a recording.
That no one can see with each other of the cover art of 2003's Ghost Master. We're gonna end the show. Thanks for listening to it. And we'll see you next week. And as always, let us cling together.